Here's a question from Susie. She has a problem with text animation, and she doesn't describe fully what she's using. I'll get to that in a second, but her problem is that the text out animation isn't working for her, and she finally ends up having to use a keyframe and then using opacity to kind of input a fade. Let's take a look at this. Okay, so Susie responded that she was using a font, and this is actually in the exact order in which I asked the questions, and I can see I did a bad job asking for additional information. But that being said, she uses the font Poppins Light, and the animation out is single word shrinks, but she actually tried a bunch of other ones, including fade 1, disappear, verbatim, evaporate, and fade out. And the text, of course, she says, is on its own row or track is what she means. And this was a follow-up question that I had put at the end, which was probably the most important. Which text element was she using? And she indicates basic 6. Now, she also provides a screenshot, which is going to be important. We'll follow up on that in a second. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is of course, find that title, and she called it Basic 6, and so I happened to search before, and here's Basic 6, and I'll drag it down to the timeline. And let's just go back to her comment here. Okay. So we can do the other things. And she says that the font she's using is Poppin Light. Now, if we look at this text, we can see that it is not Poppin Light. It's not the font. So we'll go ahead and find Poppins Light right here. So now we're using the same font as her. And then she says she's using the out animation shrinks word. So we'll go to animation. And we will go to out, and then we will look for shrinks word. And this one right here. We'll simply click on that. We see that it's 0.8 of a second. So what we need to do is we need to go over here to the end, and we can see, yeah, it's working fine. She mentioned she used fade 1, and so we put that here, and yeah, that works fine. Disappear, she uses that. That works fine. And she did a bunch of these, leap downward and whatever, but I did like the one that she used here, which was verbatim. There's verbatim. And that was pretty cool out. They all work, but then again, I'm just doing the basic things. There's nothing else on my timeline. So let's go back to looking at her screenshot. And this is not a judgment on Susie. I would prefer that they use the print screen function on the keyboard so we get a snap of the entire screen of Filmora, because there's a lot of information we can use. And post that so we get a total screenshot. But let's look at what's happening here on what can we tell from this screenshot here. We can tell that she's got 2 audio tracks. She's using speed ramping on one of the audio tracks. We can see here that she has a black background that uses a transition. And here is her text that she's using, and it looks like she used keyframes on fading it in and fading it out. And I'm not quite sure what this one here is, so I'm just kind of guess at that. Well, I can't even guess at it because I can't remember what this color means, but I have asked her to follow up on that. So because what I want to do is I want to recreate this. This number of tracks with these number of little attributes attached to everything, it takes up a lot of compute power when you're working on something, especially when you're trying to render. Now we can tell from her timeline that this hasn't rendered. In other words, it's in what we call a lazy load mode. It's up there, and if you have a really powerful computer, yeah, go ahead and work. You're not going to experiencing any lagging. But if you have a little less memory in your computer, or you don't have the right GPU, then you're probably better off waiting for the rendering to occur. So here's the thing that puzzles me, and I had to ask this question also. So it's 00:40, 00:45. So I can't tell from this screenshot if we're looking at the 45-minute mark. I'm going to pause here for a second and just switch over to my own screen. You can see here that the timeline is made up of 00, which is hours, 00, which is minutes, 00, which is seconds, and 00, which is frames. So hers was 00:45. Are we seeing the last four, or are we seeing the first four set of numbers? And if I try to zoom out as much as possible, yes, indeed, I think we see something here. If we're going to get to just 2 digits, we are actually looking at a project that's 45 minutes long. In other words, if I was to zoom in as far as I can, I'm going to see the full number of digits. So returning to her screenshot, we now know that this is indeed a 45-minute project. It runs a little bit over 45 minutes. For many computers, this is a pretty sizable project if you did not take a lot of things into considerations when you were loading it up. But we've demonstrated that there isn't an issue with the actually out animation. So I'm going to say at this point here, what is happening for Susie is that she is running out of memory at this point in the timeline. And the computer simply cannot keep up with the computations that are occurring in order to render this section here. Stacking this stuff on here requires extra memory. So I would say that for Susie, the ideal situation would probably be to split the project into 2 segments. In other words, export the front half of the project. And I have other videos. You can check my channel on how to overcome these problems when the computer can't keep up. But so if she limits the amount of information on the timeline, this animation will work. And the other thing is, if you know you're going to be working on a big project, just to summarize what I've said in other videos, and you know it's going to be a lengthy thing, there's a couple of things that you want to do. You may want to plan to do your project in segments to begin with. Build a segment, export it, build another segment, export it, and then start a new project, combine the segments. And what this does is it renders on the export all of these things into one single track. Everything is condensed. You can combine multiple segments that will then allow you to export a finished project, that you're not going to have these issues when you're editing and when you're exporting. The other key thing here, I can't harp on this enough, is to use the Instant Cutter tool, and I have a video on that in my channel as well, on how to use the Instant Cutter tool. But let me break away just a second just to show you quick. The Instant Cutter tool can save you a lot of memory, or make more memory available to your project. In other words, instead of using the standard, well, I didn't really want to do that. I just wanted to expose the list here. Yeah, here we go. Using the Instant Cutter tool, instead of using just import media files or import a folder's worth of media or any of these other features, use the import with Instant Cutter tool. This is a tool that allows you to cut out the the segments of video clips that you're going to use in your project, and only use that portion of the clip that you're actually going to use. When you stick something down onto the timeline and you cut it up into pieces, it doesn't disappear from memory. You cut it up and you close out your project, you save your project, you open it up the next day, you can stretch that thing you cut up all the way out to its full length. And you can only do that because it's being loaded into memory. So if you were to trim all of these things, the Instant Cutter tool, actually what it does is it makes little copies or little files that are copies of your original. And it does it in a lossless method, which basically means that you don't lose any quality by doing this. And you can make 1 or 2 or 3 clips out of the same larger clip, but you're only bringing in what you need, perhaps a little bit more just in case you want to stretch it out. But this will save you a lot of memory, and this could potentially have saved Susie's problem. So my analysis of this situation is that it's a large project. The computer is starting to run out of memory, and that's not a fault of owning a computer that has less memory than another computer. That's not about this. But planning or changing your workflow, knowing that you have a limitation, will overcome this problem.